Hand it over, that thing, your dark soul. For my lady's painting.
Dark Souls is a bad game. That's what one of my friends told me one time. And to some extent I can understand why they thought it was a bad game. I almost convinced myself it was a bad game. But there's one reason why I didn't believe them. In my opinion, Dark Souls is a masterpiece. It's not just Dark Souls, it's really every Soulsborne game. Elden Ring, Bloodborne, Sekiro, all of it. But for this video, I'm going to use Dark Souls as an example because I think it's the best example. There are several aspects of Dark Souls that make it better than most video games in my opinion. It's not the gameplay. I mean, the gameplay is good, but that's not what makes it different. Having a gameplay is a staple that every video game should have. The soundtrack of Dark Souls is also something that makes it drastically different than most video games. The culmination of the chorus and the instruments combining into a truly amazing score. In my opinion, one of the things that makes Dark Souls better than any video game series I've ever seen is the story. But that doesn't really answer my question. Well, I did answer part of it. My question was what makes it different. And I said the story, but that's a little broad. What about the story makes it different than every other video game that has an amazing story? Games like The Last of Us, Red Dead Redemption 2, and many others have amazing stories that everyone loves. But I feel like there's just something different about Dark Souls. It has all the things that a great story has. It has good characters, it has a good theme, it has all the things every other story has, but it just is a little bit different. There are many themes in Dark Souls that I believe makes it much better than many video games. And one of those themes is the darkness of it. At first glance, Dark Souls seems like a very fun game that doesn't have that many dark things. But as you play it, it increasingly grows on you. As you play the game, you get more grossed out by the grotesque creatures that are in the world of Dark Souls. It could be seeing the face of a fellow hollow soldier who lost his mind in Undeadburg, or maybe it takes longer for you as you get into Blighttown and seeing the horrific creatures that plague its town. No matter what it is, you will be disturbed at some point during the game. The question is, when? Even when you see the word victory after defeating a boss, you look around and you see all the horrible things around you still lurking, waiting to kill you, waiting to scare you. Each time you kill a boss, you sit there and you just hear the sound of silence. It lingers. Sometimes you can literally feel the loneliness. It's always in the back of your mind. No matter what happens, you are always reminded that you are alone. No one is helping you. Even though you meet many NPCs that are friendly, you are all on your own journey. You are all alone. There is a sense of loneliness that you can never escape until you turn the game off. But then, when you go back, you want it to end. When will it end? When will the hopelessness end? When will the pain end? That may be a reason why many people don't like it, because it's too hopeless. It's not happy. None of it is. The moment you set foot in Lordran, you are plagued with horrible things that will haunt you forever. I believe these two things, the loneliness and the sense of darkness, are the things that just make Dark Souls feel different. The sense of loneliness. In many games you have companions, and you have a character, but in Dark Souls, you make your own character, and you are alone. You meet the first NPC, Oscar of Astora. Oscar soon descends into insanity, then perishes, leaving you all alone again, fighting the asylum demon all by yourself. And then you beat it, you set foot in Lordran, and then you see all of the horrible things in front of you. It feels hopeless. And then you keep moving, you keep fighting bosses, and you keep beating them. No matter how many times you die, you keep getting back up, and you keep fighting. And then it's over. The game is over. You beat it. The one thing you prayed for, you want back. You had fun playing the game. All the NPCs you met, you remember helping them, helping Siegmeyer find his purpose, helping him find the courage that he never had, helping Solaire find his son, and fighting the final boss with him. All of the cool weapons you found all along the way, the hours you spent fighting the bosses that cause you so much pain. You miss it. You can't help but play it again. And then it keeps ending. Every time you play the game, it feels less and less as special as it did the first time. This sounds much like the lore in Dark Souls. As the narrator says in the opening cinematic of Dark Souls 1,
in the age of ancients, the world was unformed, shrouded by fog. A land of grey crags, arch trees, and everlasting dragons. But then there was fire, and with fire came disparity. Heat and cold, life and death, and of course, light and dark. Then from the dark they came and found the souls of lords within the flame. But soon the flames will fade, and only dark will remain.
this is a theme that is reverberated throughout the entire series of Dark Souls. The problem that always persists is that the flame always fades, and people keep prolonging it, but each time you relink and rekindle the flame, it gets weaker and weaker, and eventually you can't relink it anymore. And then chaos ensues. Anyone trying to find a way to keep the flame going, because nobody wants to live in a world of darkness. But the dark is inevitable. The flame cannot stay going forever. It has to end. Things have to end. Nothing lasts forever. When you listen to the voices of every NPC in Dark Souls, you can feel the authenticity. You can hear their hopelessness, their ambition. Whether it be Solaire's hopelessness in his doubt that he may never find his own son, or it could be the terrible thought that Siegmeyer may never have the strength or courage to solve his own problems. Or it may be Greyra in Dark Souls 3 and his eternal want to help those who are less fortunate than the rich and powerful. Or at the end of the DLC of Dark Souls 3, when you hear the voice of Slave Knight Gale, you can hear the desperation in his voice as he begs you to give him the Dark Soul. Many, if not all, NPCs in every Dark Souls game ends in a horrible tragedy, each distinguishable and different from the other, all showing morals about the horrible things in the society or the world we live in. It breaks your heart after each and every one. A fate that personifies this theme the most is Knight Artorias, one of Lord Gwyn's 4 knights. Knight Artorias was a legendary knight that was famed with courage and strength. But when he was tasked to rescue Princess Dusk from the ancient city of Ulusil and battle the Abyss, the horrible darkness that swallows everything it comes across, he was not strong enough. He was not strong enough to resist its temptation. All of the other knights that fought with him gave up because they knew they weren't strong enough to ward off the Abyss. But Artorias kept fighting. The consequences of his choice to not give up cost him his humanity, slowly being corrupted by the Abyss, losing each and every bit of his humanity. He was not able to ward off the Abyss, but there was one who was strong enough. The Chosen Undead, the protagonist of Dark Souls 1, came across Artorias on their journey to save Princess Dusk for themselves. When they come across Artorias, they see that he is now a shelf of his former self, corrupted by the very thing that he swore he would destroy. After Artorias hurls the hollowed Ulusil citizen at you, you see him charge at you, and you can't help but not want to fight him. A once honorable and courageous knight, now turned into a mindless slave, doing the bidding of the Abyss. And then you defeat Artorias, and his efforts are credited after you are able to destroy the Abyss. Only you know the true story. Others know Artorias as the knight who destroyed the Abyss and saved Princess Dusk, when really, it was the Chosen Undead who did it. It feels bittersweet because the thought of Artorias makes you want to think and believe that he was strong enough, but then you come back to reality and you realize that he was never strong enough, but you wanted him to. That's the sad part. After you destroy the Abyss and you come back to Lordran, it's all over again. What do? Each protagonist of Dark Souls 2, and Dark Souls 3, the Chosen Undead, the Bearer of the Curse, and the Ashen One, are all the same, lonely knights who came up from the dead to complete a mission that they never wanted to do themselves, but they have to do it. They meet fellow soldiers and companions along the way, only to find them perishing. Each time you complete a Dark Souls game, there is a moment where you stand after defeating the final boss before you relink the flame and just listen to the silence. After everything, it's only you. You have no one. You are completely and utterly alone. That is something that makes it just feel so much different than any other video game. The fact that no matter where you are in the game, you are always reminded that the only one that can change anything is you. If you want something to change in your life, you have to change. And if you lose track of your mission and give in to the darkness within you, then you go hollow. A metaphor in that if you succumb to your darkest fears, your darkest nightmares, then you will lose your humanity. You will lose your purpose. Those who lose their purpose or don't have a purpose are mindless drones that walk around with no intent. They have no meaning. So we've talked a lot about many things that make Dark Souls a great video game. But there's still something that lingers. We haven't found the full aspect of what makes it just different. I know I have kept reiterating this many times, but it all comes back to the story. The emotion in each NPC can only be created by someone who is so passionate about what they do. To perform a voice of emotion is to feel that emotion. As the German philosopher George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel once said, "Nothing great in the world has ever been accomplished without passion." That goes for music, the story, the voice acting, everything. It all comes back to passion. But that's not the one thing that makes it different. That's just the basis of what makes a great story in a great video game. There is still one thing that makes it different. Something that makes you keep guessing. That is the ambiguity of Dark Souls. The idea that you don't really know everything. The environmental storytelling shows you the aftermath of a once thriving society, but now fallen and destroyed. The inhabitants lost their humanity, driven mad, lonely. The only way to find the real story, or what you think is the real story, are the items you pick up, the weapons you obtain. The item descriptions in every piece of armor, item, and weapon gives you a little spark of that story, but it doesn't give you everything, so you have to complete it yourself. You have to come up with your own story. You have to ignite your own creativity. This is a strategy that I think more video games should give out. This strategy breeds creativity from the player and the audience. It doesn't give you all the information, but it gives you just enough information that you keep guessing. It gives you just enough information that you feel like you know it, but then you don't. And then you question why things the way they are. But you won't ever know, because you have to figure it out yourself. You have to come up with your own story. So you start to wonder why I put a clip of Slave Knight Gale in the beginning of this video. I guess you're gonna have to figure that out yourself.